All Corte Madera residents are welcome. Here's the thing, just putting down
Take yourself off the camera then.
oh,
Well, you're putting me on the camera no matter
no
where.
matter what, that is following. As long as you, as soon as you speak, it finds you. Pretty fancy, call it owl. So, you can put on a disguise if you like, or.
That's what I thought it was.
Or stand outside.
Just welcoming some people here.
Okay.
We'll another couple minutes. Hopefully everybody can see the screen who's on Zoom and can hear me talking. If you can't, you're able to unmute yourself. You're able to use your video if you want to at any point. But a thumbs up from Jennifer. Sounds like good.
All right. Shall we begin?
All right.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, you gentlemen in person and all those online. My name is Phil Boyle. I'm the senior planner here with the town of Corte Madera. And with me is Tracy Hegarty, who's assistant planner here at the town. And we have been working with the planning commission on revising the reviewing and revising the Corte Madera design review regulations for the entire town. Since the fall of last year, I'll go into a little bit more detail. And this is a public workshop. It's not a meeting to make any decisions. It's not, the planning commission isn't involved. It's staff talking to residents and residents of Christmas Tree Hill and perhaps any resident of Corte Madera. So welcome, glad you're all here. I think this will probably take about an hour. Kind of depends on how many questions and answers. There was no time limit.
This is my first time here.
Very good. Glad to have you.
Welcome. It's good to have you. So I will launch in and give a little bit of background. Up on the slide, up on the screen, there's the various dates we've had meetings in the past. Like this, the very first time we sort of started talking about design review guidelines was with the town council way back in 2019. That was just a brief discussion to kind of bring them up to date on where the design review guidelines are at that point. And all this information, all the background information can be found on the town's website. We have a design review regulations update website, which will give you a lot of background information. So please take a look at that. Like I mentioned before, fall of last year, we started more formal discussions with the planning commission back in September, when we discussed the whole variety of different amendments and kind of giving an overview of the design review regulations and what are some of the things we might want to look at changing. Meeting 2 weeks after that, we had another meeting with the planning commission and just continued the same discussion. We took a little bit of a break and reconvened spring of this year. Back in May, we had another planning commission workshop, and it was built upon those previous meetings. We had some good feedback from some local architects and a good lively discussion about the guidelines overall. And then one thing that came out of the last meeting in May was the desire for some possible changes to the Christmas Tree Hill guidelines. And we wanted to reach out to the Christmas Tree Hill residents first to get your feedback and get particular comments and concerns that you have. So that's the purpose of this meeting, to really drill down and talk about what's unique and specific about Christmas Tree Hill. And what are some of the guidelines that are more strict, that make it basically smaller projects. And in a nutshell, smaller projects on Christmas Tree Hill are required to go design review as compared to ones in the flatheads. So if you're building a small project in Christmas Tree Hill, you may need to go through design review, but you wouldn't have to do that if you live down here in the Baylands. So that is the kind of the, again, I'll repeat, no formal action will be taken at this meeting. And future planning commission public hearings will be scheduled in the coming months. So an overview of what is design review. Design review is, all jurisdictions have, I think all jurisdictions have a design review. And design review is the discretionary process that helps control the visual and physical character of the town. So it gives staff and the planning commission and citizens an opportunity to give feedback on what buildings are going to look like. Whether those are residential buildings, commercial buildings, additions, and also public facilities, parks, and various things like that. It helps to ensure that new development and alterations of existing development meets the standards in terms of building height, setbacks, and so on. It is a public and transparent process that guides the design of the community with the express desire to have it align and be consistent with the general plan and our zoning ordinance. Design review requires analysis of the site, requires analysis of grading, the size and bulk of the building itself, where that building is placed on the land, how that building is going to impact, could potentially impact nearby residents in terms of light, air, privacy, and view. So that is the overview of design review. Probably if anybody has any questions at this point, go ahead and jump in. That's kind of a brief overview, and we'll get into more specifics as we go.
Yes, and no need to raise hands. This is informal. If you guys
Yeah.
want to speak in the room, feel free to ask a question or interrupt. Online, you can unmute yourself if you have a question or something's not making sense, and you can turn your camera on and off if you want as well. And I'll carry on with any questions for now, or
Your presentation, chat.
Sounds good.
okay. So Phil alluded to this a little bit, that there's special. But we have one more joining us, so I'll pause for a quick second.
Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. I came in here 6:45.
You did?
There wasn't a car in the parking lot.
Huh.
And I thought, I didn't see the number and I thought, oh my God, hopefully for the dental office is upstairs. I know this building, but I couldn't see the number. And
We
I
are
was
in the right spot.
wandering
You
around.
found this.
I'm sorry.
That's all right, no problem. You didn't miss much. We're just kind of giving a quick
Is
overview.
there only 3 of us here?
There's several people online, so
Oh.
this little owl device is gonna look at you, and if you talk,
Oh,
and show
okay.
who's talking to the people that are watching us on
I
Zoom.
see. Okay, do we sign this?
You can
Yes,
sign that
please.
if you like, it'd be great, and there's some handouts there.
Oh,
if you wanna- you just missed a couple of slides. We just kind of gave an overview of the process and talked about that this is an informal public workshop. We're not gonna make any decisions. And the planning commission has been working on the design review guidelines overall for several months. And this is more just to zero in and focus on Christmas Tree Hill.
Wonderful. I'm at the base.
Good,
Okay.
welcome.
341 Redwood.
341 Redwood, okay, terrific.
All right, so as I was saying, Bill alluded to this a little bit a minute ago, that there are special regulations that apply to Christmas Tree Hill. And everyone knows this, it seems everyone's from Christmas Tree Hill, but this is the overlay zone. It's called a special purpose overlay zone. It has lots of different rules and regulations, and there's a very small piece of those that we're going to talk about tonight. But if anybody has questions overall about what might apply to Christmas Tree Hill, you can ask that, at the end. More about Christmas Tree Hill, there's about 285 residential lots. There's a few commercial lots at the bottom. There's design guidelines, that were adopted in 1994 as a result of activism on the part of residents that live on Christmas Tree Hill. And the Christmas Tree Hill Dwellers Association, kind of like an architectural review and homeowners association. And really the purpose of the overlay is to protect the unique features of Christmas Tree Hill, its character. There's some environmental and scenic qualities, and then there's some health and safety aspects as far as the people and the property on the hill.
There's how many lots?
About 285.
That's all, huh?
That's the residential. Yeah, there's a handful of commercial kind of at the bottom.
Yes, I know that.
Yeah.
I'm around the corner. So.
Good.
More about specifically, what first thing that we're going to talk about is the threshold for design review. Design review is the discretionary process before you get your building permit. So there's a certain level of uncertainty and time and cost associated with a project that needs design review before it needs a building permit. And design review applies all over town. And the threshold off the hill for design review. When do I need a design review permit? If I'm in the flats or elsewhere in Corte Madera, I need to have an addition that's 250 square feet or more, or 15 feet in height. On the hill, the threshold is much lower, meaning that projects may need design review when they're much more minor in nature. On Christmas Tree Hill, your addition that's 100 square feet or more in area needs a design review permit. And we'll show you a little bit more about what's the difference between a 100 square foot addition and a 250 square foot addition. But big picture is
100 square feet needs design review?
correct.
Yep.
You hit the nail on the head. Much easier to trigger a design review requirement on Christmas Tree Hill.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had a project going and I stopped it. So I've had my variances allowed, but my contractor walked seriously underbid it because prices here went sky high. I'm sorry. The questions are afterward.
Anytime, if you have a question, feel free to interject.
Okay.
And
I see, you got it up
I
behind.
sure do.
Maybe I should turn around.
One other major difference.
Oh, it's on that.
Yes, in the threshold
I
for
can't.
design review is for accessory structures. An accessory structure is a shed, a detached structure, detached from the main residence. And on Christmas Tree Hill, you need a design review for your shed or detached structure when it's 50 square feet in area or more, so 5 by 10, or when it's 6 feet or more in height. Those types of structures need design review. However, elsewhere in Corte Madera, in the similarly zoned residential areas, an accessory structure like a shed would need to be 120 square feet, so 10 by 12, in order to trigger a design review requirement. It would also need to be more than 10 feet height to trigger a design review requirement. So again, the different thresholds I'm showing is highlighted on the screen.
Was that, height and area?
Good question. It's either one of those. So if I don't want design review, I've got to check off both the boxes. I've got to be less than 50 square feet, and I've got to be less than 6 feet in height.
Right.
So if you have, if you have a small 40 square foot structure, but it's 7 feet in height, then it would need design review.
Well, if I've got 11 feet high, then I'm too high, right?
It just needs to, yeah, it's not that it's too high, it means,
Well,
yeah, it means it would need design review.
okay, so I haven't done that.
And these are not limits to sizes on the hill. These are just the threshold by which you need this is a discretionary design review permit. Right, you can build a larger accessory structure than 50 square feet.
Oh, yeah, I mean, they're just big, to the tear down now. It's
Right, yeah.
been sitting for a year. I don't know why.
And here,
I know.
what I mean? And Phil and I are going to show you some examples of these smaller projects that needed design review approval.
Oh,
This one was on Summit Drive, and there are two short storage sheds that were 17 square feet each, but they were each 8 feet high. So since they were over 6 feet height, they needed design review approval.
on Summit.
That was on
On
Summit.
Summit.
Okay.
And then just to go a little bit deeper into design review. So design review is a process where you're dealing with, you're talking with the planners
I know, I know.
and you're getting, and notices are being,
Doing it for everyone.
and notices are being sent to the neighbors. And so there's two levels of design review. There's staff level and the planning commission level. So if you're, I won't go into all the details, but if you're doing a relatively small project, we're gonna do it at the staff level. Neighbors are still gonna get notified, you're still gonna pay a fee, you're still gonna go through the general process. And the requirements are still the same to get your design review approval, but it's less expensive and it's faster and there's no public meeting. If it's a larger project, basically 2,000 square feet or more, or you're adding a second story, then you're gonna go to the planning commission, and that's a longer and more expensive process. So those are two levels of design review that we have. So now another example,
The next, house looks like mine.
yeah, so this is on Edison, this is another example, this is a minor design review or staff level design review. Because it's 120 square foot addition. There's over 100 square feet, so that went through the staff level design review. Hello,
Hi,
welcome.
come on in.
Come on in.
My name is Des.
And the 100 square foot addition is there on the left, surrounded in circled in red. And that was approved back in 2017. So it just gives you an example. We've got another example that shows a little bit more. The next one shows before and after to give you a sense of what, so this is down on the lower part of Redwood. This is a minor, both of these are minor design review. And they were for 26 square foot addition. And mainly because they're adding new windows and openings and decks. So that's another feature that they had for design, they came up with, and they originally wrote the Christmas Tree Hill design guidelines is, even if you're building a small project, as small as 26 square feet, if you're adding a window or adding a deck, they thought back in the day that now, that window or that deck may impact neighbors' privacy. And so these small projects were required to go through design review. And this is an example too. Two elevations above is existing or original, and below is what is proposed. So they're on the left, they greatly opened up that whole facade, put windows up above, as well as opening up the deck area. So it really opened up the house quite a bit. So that was again approved back in 2016. So that's another example of a that's probably one of the smallest, certainly in square footage. I think that's probably one of the smallest projects we've sent through design review, and mainly is because of the windows in the outdoor area. Secondly is the shed up on Morningside. And so this is an example on the left was the shed was installed prior to talking to us. And so we contacted the owner and worked with the owner and required them to go through minor design review. And in doing so, we notified the neighbors, we worked with the applicant, and the applicant, in our opinion, and I think the neighbor's opinion, improved the look of the structure by basically redesigning it and putting shingles on it instead of, it was kind of a Home Depot, out of the box shed there on the left originally. And so that was approved in the, this is an 80 square foot shed, 8 feet in height. So it means, so it covered both those, or it covered the height threshold, it went over the height threshold.
And was anything required because of the steep hill that it's on?
We did require them to put netting and landscaping down below on the hillside that was failing, it's so steep. Okay, and now moving on, so here are some examples. Here are 6 projects that due to the low thresholds of design review in Christmas Tree Hill, these are required to go through the process. These were all approved from 2000, some as early as 2016, and one approved early this year. So the gist of this table and these examples is to show if we change the rules as we're proposing, you'll see in future slides. If we would have changed the rules back in 2016, the only difference would have been that these 6 projects would not have been gone through the process.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So,
It seems very excessive for 26 square feet.
yeah, yeah. And so I think that kind of is what this illustrates, that
I was gonna have to do put on 10 by 17.
what's that?
I was gonna put on a 10 by 17 project, but I stopped because that everything went up, the prices went up so much. I have $1 million tear down.
Yeah, prices are through the roof, and unfortunately, there's nothing the town can do
Yeah.
to affect
So I
prices,
didn't do it.
that is construction prices.
I'm gonna do it within the interior, just change the interior.
Is what you're considering that include non-conforming and conforming sort of situations, or just those that are currently on conforming lots or conforming buildings or structures?
The rules would apply evenly to all of the overlay, all the parcels on Christmas Tree Hill, except for commercial parcels. But if there was a non-conforming structure, somebody was proposing to enlarge or expand in most cases, that would require a variance approval. So there's possible that one would not have a design review application, but they would have a variance application.
Yeah, I did that.
But maybe, perhaps I heard your question, we're not, at this point, we're not.
That's not what you're talking about tonight.
Right, and we're not, that hasn't come up, to relook at the existing non-conforming regulations and change them and modify them, but if that's something, you or others are interested in, we can certainly take a look at that, but currently we feel that the existing non-conforming, which means basically a structure that was built perhaps before the rules were written. And so if you've got a structure that was built before the rules were written and you're going to maintain it, we'll let you maintain it. But if you're going to add on to it and make it more non-conforming, then you're going to need to go through a process. Yeah, and that's pretty standard.
Even if you remodel the interior,
That would be more like maintenance. Maintenance is defined in the zoning ordinance and it includes many things. And one of which is structural repairs, re-roofing it, repairing the foundation, new windows. But if you wanted to, an interior remodeling, if you wanted to add something to it, it would need to be added in conformance with zoning requirements.
Looks like Michael Harlock has his hand up on Zoom. Yes, Michael.
Hi, can you hear me?
Can.
Okay. I gathered tonight we're talking about design review threshold. We're not talking about things like the relief of front yard setbacks on Christmas Tree Hill, which is part of the Christmas Tree Hill design overlay. In other words, we're talking about just tonight, we're talking about just the threshold that would trigger design review. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
a dispensation for front yard setback on Christmas Tree Hill, which a lot of people have utilized because of slope.
Right,
Yes, and for everyone listening, our code basically says that when the property line abuts a roadway, that the setbacks for that front yard should be flexible. And based on the characteristics of the site, its topography and steepness of the slope, and those kinds of things, and that's done through the design review process. I mean, we're not proposing to change that, Michael, that section. It's
And
not
but that is unique to Christmas Tree Hill.
correct.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
it is.
Yeah, and setbacks, right, and that's a good point, 'cause, you know, setbacks are fundamentally there to keep houses a certain distance apart from each other.
And
Setbacks throughout the town. And, however, Christmas Tree Hill is such a unique place, we know there's so many houses built right on the street. To have a standard front yard setback, which is 15 to 20 feet down here on the flats, would make life very difficult for anything happening in Christmas Tree Hill. So the rear setback and the side setbacks for Christmas Tree Hill are normal, the same in the rest of the town. Up front, because it's such a unique topography and the way it's built, the front setback is flexible, so basically zero. It can be zero and is in many cases.
while I have the floor, may I further interrupt to ask?
Please.
The nowhere else in town are windows included in the design review threshold. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
like I mentioned before, windows and decks are only talked about as a design review threshold and in Christmas Tree Hill.
And I'll clarify real quick on that, and there's only one exception, and that's if somebody has an existing design review for some reason, and they're proposing to amend it, right, amend that approval and add a window where previously there was none, or add a deck or enlarge a deck where previously there was none. So they have a larger project, right, they have a second story addition, and it's got windows on two sides, but not all four sides. And that gets approved by the planning commission, and then that applicant decides, I'm gonna install a window on that upper story 6 months later. We would
okay,
process that as an amendment to the design review, and that's townwide, so.
I understand that. Well,
Okay.
I'll
Okay, let's
just,
go see what.
I'll
we can do
just,
about it.
hello. I'll just say I'm totally in favor of what you're doing here because these, I'm working with a client right now that's just over 100 square foot addition. And that's way ridiculously restrictive. It doesn't mean, of course, that you can't do it. And all these cases have been approved, but why subject them to the additional time and effort on your part as staff? So
Yeah.
anyways, I'm in favor of the leveling the playing field.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
For your input.
I see it,
Well, it just means that Christmas Tree Hill will turn into an expansion hill.
Not a zero. but Possible.
Yeah, like I told you, I'm $1 million tear down.
All right, I think
I
you're
think I
next.
saw
Oh,
Peter,
Four hands.
yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
hi.
Chase.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding this because I guess I'm not, well, I'm on my phone unfortunately. And so making it the same as R1 and R1A means it's going up to that sort of 500-foot limit.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay,
It's
Yeah.
250, yes.
so I strongly support that. I mean, I think a lot of I know it's not within the scope, but other people are commenting. I think the fewer of these design review triggers there are, the better. I think Christmas Tree Hill is, a lot of the houses are over 100 years old. Very many of them do not conform to the existing rules and regulation. And so then when you trigger these things for older properties, then it just sort of creates difficult situations around, do you even deserve to have your structure where it is today? And I think that's just sort of problematic situation for the town to be involved in these conversations. And then to the point about, what's that?
It's a Pandora's box.
Yes. And similarly to the comments about, the expense of these things, I think that's actually quite an important issue. I mean, I think the fact is when you sort of add a lot of these regulations and you basically are sort of creating a gate that longtime residents who maybe don't have the money of the newer residents are not in a position then to do anything. And we do want to maintain these properties, but then you end up in a situation where sort of the newer people with more money tend to do bigger projects. They're more professional. They have architects and lawyers, and it just sort of creates kind of an uneven playing field that I think has
Right.
changed the character of the hill over the years, and not necessarily in a good way, just because, we want to maintain some smaller, less great housing stock, just because it keeps the community diverse. And I think that's quite interesting. And I think it's important to it. So I'm in favor of, the way you're going towards sort of triggering a need to review rather than the exception, and then streamlining and making it, less is more kind of thing. Thanks.
I agree.
Thanks, Peter. Kind of in the same vein, we wanted to show, because it's hard to just think of what is 100 square feet mean and what is 250 square feet mean. So we wanted to provide a couple of examples of a floor plan. This is a floor plan of something that was submitted to the town. And handily, they have several size areas of addition. On the left here, this is a mudroom, and it's about 110 square feet. On the right here, this is a bedroom, and it's about 200 square feet. And down here, a little bit larger, this is a 250 square foot addition, which is half of a master bedroom and a little library room. One more example is showing here. Again, this is a floor plan of a single family home. Here's a good example of a 100 square foot addition, 100 square foot room. This is a primary bathroom, double sink, toilet room, and a shower. And down on the lower right is a 250 square foot room that's consists of a bedroom with a small closet. If anyone had any more comments or questions on. No, I think. Carry on. Findings. Findings are the basis by which the staff of the planning department or the planning commission approves a design review permit or other entitlement applications. They have to be affirmed in order, found in the positive in order to approve the design review permit. They're a written explanation of why is the permit approved or why it's denied. And they're discretionary. There's one example that's shown here in italics on the screen. The project will not significantly and adversely affect the views, sunlight, or privacy of any nearby residences. And a good way of understanding, discretionary and subjective is that that's an opinion of a person, that the project doesn't do those things and therefore should be approved. And that's a finding, and they're often lengthy, written out paragraphs that give several justifications, many justifications sometimes of why the project can meet that finding. There's 8 findings that are the regular findings that are made for every single design review project in the town of Puerto Madera. And then now we're back to the Christmas Tree Hill zone. There are 11 additional other findings for a Christmas Tree Hill project. I can bring up those findings. Somebody wants to, yes, those are them. They're also posted on the project webpage for these design review amendments. And I can pull them up on the screen if anybody wants to dig into what exactly those are, but I'll show you a couple examples. Where these findings come from, they came from 1994 when the overlay zone was adopted, all these different regulations. Some of them are very similar to the regular design review findings that we make for projects off the hill. Since they're repetitive, staff is looking at these, potentially reducing them in number. I'll show you some examples of how they repeat the regular findings. So this is an opportunity for us to simplify and consolidate, make it easier to understand how projects can be designed by the architect and the property owner to meet those findings if we don't have 19 of them for Christmas Tree Hill. So this is the next question for the group. Should we do this? Here's an example in the box at the top that has 2 rows with the highlighting. On the left is Christmas Tree Hill finding. And why did I highlight it? I'm highlighting the words. You read the whole paragraph and then look at the box to the right. The box to the right is the regular finding that we're making for the project. project and all projects in Christmas Tree Hill, and they're saying very similar things, that the proposed project protects the landform, existing landforms at the site. That it's not development occurring on a ridge top. It's doesn't have excessive grading. They're very similar, and we think that there's a potential to exclude that design review finding on the left, since you're making a very similar finding by default with our regular design review findings. Second row, finding number 9 for Christmas Tree Hill says impacts on neighboring residences are minimized. And then you look to the right of that row is the regular design review finding that's more specific. It says the project will not significantly and adversely affect the views, sunlight, or privacy of any nearby residences. And that's, we're making that finding in great detail for a regular design review finding, and yet here we come with design review finding number 9, and it can kind of asking us to make the same decision in a little bit less detail in the question. That being said, Christmas Tree Hill is unique and special. We don't want to get rid of all of the findings, because some are, as Michael was saying, there are unique aspects of the hill. And on the screen here, number 6 and number 7 at the bottom are some examples of the design review findings that we think are appropriate and probably should still be required to be found in the affirmative for a project on the hill. And that's that the yard setbacks have been determined based on specific site characteristics, line of sight from roadway, and relationships to adjoining properties. So Christmas Tree Hill is the only place where you can adjust the setback in the front yard based on the characteristics of the site. So that finding is important, we think. And another example of one that's important to stick is number 7 for Christmas Tree Hill. That says structures and landscaping retain the character of Christmas Tree Hill as it's seen from off the hill and from the roadway. Again, you have heavily sloped lots where you have very visible development. That's unique to Christmas Tree Hill, and that finding speaks to that. And I'm going to add.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
Sure.
That new thing that's going on down 4 houses down from me on Redwood Avenue, I was never advised of it.
So is that 317 Redwood?
I guess,
Huh?
I mean, I'm 341. So,
Okay.
you know, I tried to walk down there the other day, but I'm on a cane and it's downhill. I couldn't make it. So I have a broken pelvis. So anyway, I was never advised of any of that they were tearing down the house. I saw the storyboard. I don't live here all the time. I live in the desert in the winter,
Okay.
and I have a house at Lake Tahoe for the summer. So my house is pretty vacant.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Well, I can just say in terms of our noticing process, and I was the planner that took that one to the planning commission, and that was approved back in
Couple of years
a
ago.
couple of years, yeah, I want to say 2020. So our noticing process is everyone within 300 feet of that property will get a notice.
Well, I
Both,
went 300.
yeah, and it's sent to the address itself on Christmas Tree Hill, and then if the owner lives someplace else, it's sent to the owner's address.
Well,
wherever
I
that
mean,
may be.
my mail was forwarded to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, so you should have received it. I can double check the records and make sure it's all done by computer.
Yeah,
We rarely miss anybody. But that project went through a couple of preliminary reviews. Those were all noticed. So I think there's probably there are 2 to 4 hearings on that project.
I'm
So
sure.
there's lots of opportunity for the
Because
public.
the neighbor is very unhappy about it. Too.
Yeah, there's lots of discussions and feedback on that. Yeah.
So, well, anyway, I don't even know what's going in there. So I thought you could advise me.
Sure, yeah, if you want, I can show you the plans. A pretty good sized 2-story home is going.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah.
But they tore down there.
Yeah, they tore down the existing home
And then they started digging down the hill.
yeah, and it's been. And I don't want to go into details
In
about project.
abeyance
but-
for a long time.
Yeah, but certainly, yeah, if you want to come in and give you my card and you can come into the office, I can show you the plans.
Okay, well, I was gonna say, I'll give you my card and you can.
Sure.
Email.
Either way, yeah,
Or. Of course, I don't have a card.
But,
So,
sorry, I just want to, I didn't introduce myself to Tracy Connor, we've been talking on the phone,
Hi.
on 70 Summit.
Hi
And,
there.
so I'm in the design review process, I think,
cool.
or trying to get into it. I mean, I think I really support the findings being the same for the city, because I think it's had a lot of, issues with having an architect, engineer, and
Oh,
design that I've hired, and, you know, they don't know the specific rules, so, you know, have to have someone that specialized, I think it's not an issue, and I don't know if some of the stuff I've had in design review would be done anywhere in Corte Madera, or if it's specific to Christmas Tree Hill. I know it got triggered because it's in Christmas Tree Hill, trying to do a deck outside, I don't know if that would have been triggered in regular Corte Madera, but I mean, in any event, there's kind of two levels, you have to deal with Corte Madera rules, and Christmas tree, and there's been some extra expenses that, you know, didn't anticipate or plan for, so
Right,
take that on, so just trying to figure out.
yeah, and
So I support what you're doing.
great, yeah. Yeah,
yes, it's, a big part of decks that we really are capturing a lot of design review for decks, even if these, lower thresholds were to go away, because the decks on Christmas Tree Hill are typically very high in the air. And a deck on the flats off the second story that's greater than 15 feet height needs design review, and so it's pretty uncommon, really, unless the deck's on the first floor. Christmas Tree will have a deck that's less than 15 feet height, so, you know, I think we would still be capturing a lot of decks if we had changed these rules. A few years ago.
Can hear every
I
conversation.
think I saw someone online that turned their camera on, might want to talk with us. We haven't seen.
Yeah, this is Susie on Christmas Tree Hill. I strongly support reducing some of the redundancy and increasing some of the specificity and making the findings more clear. I think that's a really good move. I think over time things can get added that become perhaps unnecessary, and it'll make. I think it'll make the reviewers, I think it'll make it more streamlined for you and easier to report out and have people understand the process.
Great, thank you for that comment. Anybody else?
Anyone else? Feel free to chime in.
Well, I mean.
Hey there, Frank.
The
Hi,
age of
hey, Tracy.
problem. Oh,
Hi.
I
Hey,
just
Frank.
want to, hi, Phil. I just want to echo what Susie just said. I think she's spot on. Really clarifying, making it very concrete, obviously, utilizing what's the findings in the flat are great to have as a basis, and the unique qualities of the hill need to be taken into account, but also, as Susie said, that, you know, making things clear and understandable so people know exactly what they're getting themselves into. The hill has changed dramatically since this last round of findings were written in the 90s, and our lifestyles have changed, and how we, you know, function and what we do has an impact on how things are currently written. So there's a lot of things left to open to interpretation. And ideally, we like to keep things as clear and straightforward as possible. I think that would really be helpful for not only the residents, but also for the design review team. So you know what you're, what's going on.
Yeah, and just
Thanks, Frank.
Frank, and just to add to it, I think the idea, if you're doing something significant, if you're upgrading your home on Christmas Tree Hill, ideally you want to walk around, you want to go to your neighbors, show them your plans, and actually walk them through the findings. I don't think you want to walk them through 19 repetitive findings, but at least hit the highlights and how you're addressing each one of them so you can get the support. So the simpler and clearer they are, the easier it will be to do that process.
I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
So that's really, that concludes our presentation, but we certainly can continue your discussions and questions. And we just want to let you, thank you all for attending, and let you know that our that our next workshop, our next planning commission workshop will be this summer. We haven't set a date yet, probably in August. And we'll bring this information back to the planning commission and get their feedback. And then eventually the planning commission will make a recommendation to the town council saying, you know, these are recommendations on how we want design review regulations in the town of Corydon to change. And then Tracy and I will present that to town council, and then they will deliberate and ask us questions, and go back and forth, and there'll be time for public comment at that point as well. And then eventually they will make the final decision on how these regulations will be changed.
Okay, so you're not gonna mention any of the public works that are planned?
Public works
Christmas tree
projects
hill, yeah, the project.
in terms of sewer and utilities.
Sidewalks. I
Um,
was advised by a public works guy this week about it, and my neighbor says PG is gonna underground the utility. I haven't heard anything, you know, but
yeah,
but
we
we
won't,
have a transformer, you know, not even 100 feet from my house.
sure, certainly utilities is a huge issue, especially
Right,
electrical poles. That's not part of
yes,
the
I
scope
know.
of this.
But I have to put in a sump pump because my basement this year flooded to the tune of 2 feet,
Sure,
my
yeah.
whole basement. And I was living in the desert in the winter. And so I had to get a sump pump and pump it out, and everything in there is mildewed, including my car. So I'm in the insurance process now. I've only been home here for 2 weeks. So I'm like, got an appointment every day, and I'm having it painted, and then I have to have the sump pump put in for a
Right.
$10,000 project plus a permit for a sump pump to drain under the sidewalk to the street.
Phil?
Yeah,
Phil?
Michael.
Yeah.
Huh?
So I know you're trying to wrap up. Just one final question that I have.
Sure.
I don't know if it's in the overlay zoning district or in the findings, but there was a part of the 94 action of the citizens was this language about the Christmas Tree Hill architecture shall follow a cottage-like image. And of course, that became highly contentious. Now, I don't know if that's in the findings or if it was more in the background statement about goals.
Yeah,
It
it is in the back-
obviously became very contentious and in some ways kind of outdated, particularly if you take the house at Edison and Summit. So I just
Right.
wonder if that is sort of a vestigial organ or what.
My house is 900 square feet.
Yeah, that's a good point, Michael. It's not in one of the findings. That's in the design guidelines, kind of the overview. And I think it was obviously the thought back in the 90s is to try to put something in writing that's a goal that they were shooting for back then, to continue and preserve the cottage look of the hill. And obviously things have changed, and yeah, we haven't talked specifically about removing that. But
You might want, if it's still contained in the findings, you might want to address it because it's,
yeah, it's not in the findings.
I don't, it's not in the findings. Okay.
But it does come up, even though it's not in the findings, and though it doesn't come up nearly as often as it did 6 years ago or 7 years ago when I started here. But it does come up once in a while, especially when someone proposes a large modern home. People who don't want that usually point to the cottage comment.
Yeah, Michael, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm interested in what the preferred, look and feel would be. I have a house that is a 1907 house, and it's wonderful. It's lasted for over 100 and getting on 120 years. So but it needs to be redone. It has to be from a hazard standpoint. So
Right.
what's the vision and style? And I'm sure it wants to be eclectic, but visually appealing what's the next 100 years look like? So I'm trying to come up with, and that's outside of the scope of this meeting. So
Yeah, well,
I'll
it's a
shut
good-
up
that's a
at
good
some
question.
point, but it would be interesting to see kind of what is the vision? And
That's a good question, and that actually, that came up, an architect brought that up at a previous meeting. When we were talking about just design review guidelines for the whole town. And one finding is, does this proposed house or this proposed addition fit into the neighborhood? Or, is it compatible? Is it consistent with the neighborhood? And this architect suggested that we maybe keep that language, but also add that, or maybe highlight the value of good architecture and good design. And if it's a really beautiful house, but it doesn't fit in or it doesn't match the neighborhood, in this person's opinion, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And so I think that kind of talks a little bit about your comment. And to answer your question, I don't think we know. I mean, we're not proposing. I've heard other people propose that, a particular look of Christmas Tree Hill be codified and written down,
Yeah.
like places
Yeah.
like Santa Barbara and other places where if you live in this district, you must have a tile roof, and you must have X, Y, and Z, Spanish style, whatever it will be. That doesn't exist anywhere in Corte Madera. It may exist in certain neighborhoods in parts of Marin County, but that's a very, unique. That's a whole different exercise.
yeah, and the more guidelines you set, the harder it is to get the character that you truly want. I work with
Yeah.
some of the most renowned architects around the world, and typically it's usually not a particular style.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult thing to identify, and if there's not a strong community support, it's almost impossible. I mean, it was tried on Christmas Tree Hill at the beginning, but the horse is out of the barn, really, and part of it was hard to, there was some assumption of that there was a unique character of Christmas Tree Hill, but even that was contentious at the time. I mean, there was some examples that were other than the Bay Area shingle style, even in turn of the century. So very difficult to apply that type of thing, as Phil said, unless you have a Santa Barbara situation or a Danville situation where it's very codified. Interesting question, though.
Yes. What do you do about places like I live on Hillpath, where it's, I have no driveway, I have no direct access except for a walkway,
Right.
some stairs. How does that fit into the whole picture of the hill? Other than it's been there forever, so 100 years old.
In terms of maybe providing additional parking or better access, or
I emailed you about the parking.
right, yeah.
Yeah. Not just me, it's many of us that
Sure.
have direct access.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I mean, one way to address that is through these regulations. continue to require people to provide parking when they add on to the home or they do a major expansion. Then you have to provide at least, 2 parking spaces on your lot. And so that will hopefully relieve and leave more open, more of the public spaces available. And we're certainly, any chance we get, if there's able to create a new public parking space on the hill, we will, if we can, but that's also balanced with, fire protection, keeping the roadways clear, all those kinds of things. Yeah.
I stopped my project because my contractor had underbid it. And I decided I could do some interior remodeling and get myself, I had a bath under the stairwell and then replaced it with a washer dryer so I didn't have to go to the basement because I'm 82 years old. And so, I've got a broken pelvis now. So now I don't have a bathroom downstairs. And my glutes are killing me. I'm going up 20 stairs to, get from the basement to the up to my bedroom and bath upstairs, which is just 2 little dormers.
It's a challenging place to live, and the benefits
Yeah,
are you get those incredible views, huh?
And it was charming, when I bought it in 84, 83. And I bought it out of probate. So
I think they were looking, they're reviewing all this and
I didn't even
inviting us
know
about
about
an
the
opportunity
94.
to comment.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you
and
for
be
your
educated about it.
feedback. It's important to the town that the people affected have a chance to provide their
I
input.
didn't know about all these regulations in 94 either. I've been an owner since 83.
Yeah, that's what it all.
I don't know, I've had the same address since then. I always keep it as my mailing address. I've never changed it unless your stuff doesn't get forwarded to me. I don't know. I mean, it's only been the last 10 years that I've been down in the desert. But before that, we're talking 94.
Yeah.
I don't know. I might have
Do you
been
get
out
our,
of the
do you get our
country.
news, do you get our newsletter? Send out a newsletter once a
I
week.
did get a newsletter,
Great.
this week
Okay.
because my mail is starting to come again to my
Okay.
house.
Good.
But that's how I knew about this meeting, and I got this flyer.
Great.
Good, okay.
But I don't know, here. Which one?
Jennifer has her hand raised. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, hello. This is, I don't want to open a can of worms, but one of the questions that comes up in my mind that's different about Christmas Tree Hill is the ADU requirements and how they're distributed along the hill. And I know, that's a lot of different discussions have been happening about that, but I'm just wondering if, in my area, there are already two ADUs that fulfill the possibilities presently, but like up at the very top where I would imagine it's more dangerous to install an ADU at this point for evacuation purposes. I just wonder, there's still a bunch of available spots, it looks like. And so I don't know with the whole switching around of planning, but I just kind of want to put out that question as a Christmas tree question too. And I'm also totally behind, making the level playing field for the design review. So thank you.
Yeah, I can try to answer your question and comment about ADUs, and it sounds like you're aware that there's what's called the capacity districts on Christmas Tree Hill, and it's cut up into different zones that have a handful of parcels in each zone, and it's based on how does that group of parcels egress off of the hill. And it within each of those zones, there's a allowed amount of ADUs, and it's really first come, first served. And many of those capacity districts are already full or over full. There's a handful that still have capacity. And it's designed to protect the people that need to get off of the hill in the event of a fire or emergency. Everybody's got to funnel down Redwood. And so given that there's limited egress, do we really want to have all of these new dwelling units on Christmas Tree Hill. So that's the purpose of the capacity district, that many, like I said, many of them are full or over full. And this was also adopted in 94. And you know, that's not part of the scope of the changes that we're looking at here with design review, but there are changes we're making to our ADU ordinance, most likely this year. And the reason for those changes is to make sure that our ADU ordinance is consistent with new state law from January. So look for that, and look for an opportunity to comment at those meetings. There would probably work a lot like this, where we have a informational workshop and study session with the planning commission and get their feedback and the public's feedback on different changes that should happen. The changes to the ADU ordinance are not necessarily the changes that we need to make for the state, but other changes that we've identified in using it that need to clarify certain regulations or clean up gray areas or areas that it's silent on how we should treat development standards for ADUs. So look for that this year, that opportunity to provide your comments on what you think Christmas Tree Hill ADU rules should look like.
I think Jennifer raises a very good point, because I think it's the districts and the allocations were somewhat arbitrary. And I'm going to be almost unconstitutional. I think they should be evaluated. You know, I know what it's based on, you know, the unique conditions and safety on the hill, but you could make that same argument on Chapman Hill and some other places that the ADU is not restricted. So I thought the council's action in upholding the ADU limitations on Christmas Tree was arbitrary. So I'll be looking to input on that subject when you get around to it. I think it's somewhat unfair. I think they should be evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
Thanks, Michael.
Well, the whole character of the hill has changed. I've been here just since '83. And I was the young person in the neighborhood. Everybody was old, and of course they all died up, and I'm still here, and I'm the old person in the neighborhood. And all the houses, not the ones right around me, but all the houses up the hill have all changed hands. There is constant traffic on Redwood, day and night, constant traffic. And my bedroom's in the front of the house, which is right, you know, on the street practically. And I can hear every one of those cars go by all night, all day. And people walking, skateboarders coming down, bicycles going up the hill. I mean, I just can't even believe who's up there now. I don't even know, you know, because I never get any notices, and I don't know because I don't live here all the time. But I'm still, you know, a homeowner.
But I think maybe to reiterate the point back to ADUs is that the new ADU rules that came down the last couple of years did not result in an increased ability to put ADUs on Christmas Tree Hill. The capacity districts stayed the same.
Yep.
And so to me, I don't know if Jennifer was wondering about that, but it's easier to build an ADU in Corte Madera. It's easier to build an ADU in the state of California, but you cannot build more ADUs on Christmas Tree Hill than you could in 1994. The capacity level hasn't changed.
Thank you.
Okay, any other
I've got to
questions
go.
or comments?
I've got to go, guys. Thank you for this session.
You're welcome. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for joining. for your
Bill,
input.
thank you very much.
Excellent input.
You're welcome.
The only other question I would have
Huh?
is, with the mounting concern about fire dangers in our community, does that
Yeah.
ever affect design review? Not ADU issues, but just design review, or does anybody ever? You ever pull anybody else in because of fire risk?
I mean, like requiring steel beams instead of
Sure.
wood and,
We all,
you know, the, what do you call them, the 2x4s, instead you use
yeah, the
the.
material. So all projects that come they go through design review and also all projects that get a building permit, go to the fire department, go to the fire marshal. So they're reviewing it for exterior materials. They're reviewing it for, we're reviewing it for vegetation, make sure vegetation is kept back. So to answer the question, yes. The design review does look at fire safety.
I've given up vegetation. The deer have defeated me. I have 2 fawns that lay in my flower bed.
Another
Now,
another benefit of living on the hill,
have all the food.
free fertilizer.
Mama deer leaves them there. All hours until I disturb them.
You must have the same view that you.
Where are you?
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, thank
Sure.
you.
Sure.
I need to send out one of
Well,
the
I'm
people
around.
that's an email.
Yes, thank you, yeah. Yeah, it's too bad that.
Yeah, it's a bit sloped. It would be a hard to be safe.
Yeah.
Spot it.
Yeah,
It would be nice to have.
a big tree came down at Crescent and Redwood.
Yeah,
And then when that came down, it opened up, kind of opened up a spot in the road for potential parking space.
Sandy,
I sent it to Public Works and they evaluated it and determined that no, it's still. If a parking space was created there and a car was parked there, it would block line of sight. It's a very tight corner.
yeah.
Just make it hard. So those are the things you have to weigh, you know, is this parking space, is this new parking space going to impact safety? That's the problem.
Well, everybody that parks in front of my house goes up the hill. Where I am on Redwood, I'm on the flat. So there's parking spaces that are marked off in front of my house. And
Yeah,
because I'm required to have 2 parking spaces in my house. I have a basement garage and then I have a long driveway that goes into the basement because the house was jacked up when they built the bridge to provide a garage. So when was that, 1940, something, 1930?
Golden Gate Bridge, yeah.
I don't know when it was actually done. The house was built in 23, so 100 years old, and I did interior remodeling. I wanted to make an exterior addition, and it was just too costly for what, at my age. So, as I say, I let the next person decide what they want to do, but I have all these plans for a single story addition. I am sure the next person will want to go 2 stories, at least as high as my neighbors. Then there's a little cottage next to me, and then there's a big massive house that's been remodeled several times with a swimming pool, and then there's the house that they just demolished.
317.
So, I mean, I'm not that far away, except that the lot of the house with the swimming pool is a double lot in the state. So I'm concerned about the character very much of the hill, because that's what enticed me to buy. I mean, yeah. I didn't really know it because I was moving from San Francisco, but as soon as I got here, I realized how lucky I was. Because I was just looking in Marin, because I was introduced to Marin back in the 80s, and I was living in San Francisco. And you just have to go over the bridge. I don't have to drive to my house at Tahoe for 4 hours to get in the sun in the summer.
Phil, Tracy,
Thank you.
Yes, Frank.
thank you guys very much. I look
You're
forward
welcome.
to next round and as this evolves. And I really appreciate you guys doing all the work.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Frank.
Thanks for your input.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought tonight was more
Good
of
night, everyone.
an overview of what's gonna happen in the whole town of Corte-Madera for Christmas Tree Hill.
Oh,
And so I thought you were gonna be bringing in, you know, public works stuff. I didn't realize it was just design review.
yeah, the discussion,
So I'm sorry, I have all these other questions because I wasn't sure of the nature of the meeting, because this is the first notice that I've ever gotten.
uh-huh.
And
Well, we're glad to have you and
Thank you very
Yeah,
much for
thanks
this
for coming.
presentation.
Sure,
I
you're
wish
welcome.
more people came, but they've already